It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Gregor Jordan. Hello again.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thanks, mate. I appreciate your time. Have you ever walked into a room and someone says, "Here comes Mr. Jordan," like the
Um,
classic movie?
no, I don't know if I have.
All right.
Yeah, and Mr. Jordan's my dad anyway.
Okay, I understand. I'll just let you know, I saw Two Hands at the Sydney Film Festival. I'm pretty sure that was the first time I saw it. So it was pretty much in advance, and I knew you had a
Yeah.
hit. Did you know you had a hit when it first showed there?
Um, Look, I don't know. I did know that the film was playing well
Mm,
in Australia. It was very interesting because Australians, every time I played it, it just went down really, really well.
mm,
But it was interesting because when we were making the film, we were very aware that it was, that it was very full of Australian slang, but a really Australian sensibility as well. Um, and we were very curious to see how well people overseas would deal with that. And so I guess it played less well in other countries than it did in Australia, but still, had fans all around the world.
mm.
But definitely it was a film that was sort of made about and for Aussies. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that you beat me to one of my questions. Was it bigger in the US or the UK, or both sort of about the same at the box office?
Oh, look, it had sort of, I guess it was sort of like a smaller indie kind of film in those other territories.
Yeah.
Um, and, I have sort of run into people over the years from, in different countries who've seen it and like it and get it. Because I think a lot of the film is very universal in terms of, what it's doing.
For
But I
sure.
think a lot of the nuance in the film that really makes, really speaks to Australian, things like, the Holdens versus Ford thing and and a lot of the slang and the, shorts and thongs and,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like a lot of the costumes and a lot of the settings and a lot of the dialogue is so uniquely Australian that they sort of enjoy it on a slightly different level.
Do you think that's why it still holds up today? Because people are like relating to it, and they might, even though they're not criminals, they can see themselves just getting around in gear like that and speaking like that.
I think so. Yeah, it is a weird thing how it does hold up, and it and interestingly, I think a lot of the stuff that was in it when it first came out was kind of retro at the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the cars were kind of old cars. They were classic cars even when the movie came out. And a lot of the costumes were sort of, slight piss takes of costumes. They weren't, and yes, people do wear that stuff and still do today. But I think there was a sort of like a bit of a weird retro vibe to it. And I think that's maybe why the movie sort of, still holds up now, because it doesn't, the costumes wise, it doesn't look super dated and
No.
and stuff. Yeah.
Was it always called Two Hands, or did you have some alternate titles?
It was pretty much always called Two Hands. I mean, interestingly, we did screen a version. The first ever screening we had was at the Sundance Film Festival, and I guess it was an interesting experience because it was also the first time it had ever really screened in front of any audience.
Okay.
So really our first test screening, if you like, was, at this world premiere at Sundance. And I guess we sort of came away from that screening and went, oh, okay, there's certain things, like we could actually make some cuts. And so we did go back into the editing room and made some cuts. And one of the cuts we made weirdly was to this sort of scene involving the dead brother ghost character, where
Right.
he says, there's the line of dialogue that he says is, "There's nothing like getting things done with your own two hands," and I guess it was this metaphor for taking control of your life and
Mm.
you know what I mean? And don't become a victim of your circumstance, you know, get things done, you know, on your own terms with your own two hands. And so, you know, that was very much a theme that was important to me and was very sort of baked into the DNA of what the whole picture was. It's just that the line that, you know, was the title got cut from the film.
Mm. Well, at one point, Heath's character, and I'll talk about the cast soon, he puts his fists up. And I thought, you know, even though it's not said in the movie, you can maybe refer it back to that.
Maybe. Like, I remember a friend of mine at the time who was working on a barge in Sydney Harbour. He said, "Oh yeah," he rings me up and says, "Oh, listen, a bunch of mates and I had seen your film, and we're trying to work out where the title came from." And one of the blokes said, "Oh, you know, I think it's got something to do, you know, with fighting. You know, it's about having to fight for your life, kind of thing." And he says, "Well, actually, I know the bloke who made that film. I'll give him a call because he'll know." And and I said, "Well, you know what? I actually think that's a pretty good interpretation of it. I think his version of what it means is probably better than mine. So go with that."
Did you have permits to shoot around Sydney back in the day, or was it a bit of guerrilla filmmaking?
No, we had permits, but interestingly, you know, the Sydney that we shot in then is a very different one to what is now. And
oh yeah,
and it's interesting over the years to see a lot of the locations that we shot in are gone. You know, and you know, a lot of the buildings and places that we shot in have are either gone or completely changed. You know, most notably the monorail, which is not there anymore.
I was about to say there's a great scene, the monorail,
Yeah.
and that's, you know, that's a relic and a bit of a history lesson.
Yeah, and it's sort of weird to think that there even ever was a monorail going around this tiny loop around Darling Harbour in the city. But yeah, no, the whole thing was permitted, but interestingly, yeah, I guess the rules regarding filmmaking in Sydney have changed so much that there's probably no way we could have made that film in quite the same way these days, because it would have been a lot harder to shoot. So I guess they were more forgiving for you know, people wanting to do silly things with film cameras.
I've got to say that the monorail also features in the first Power Rangers movie, because they filmed that in Australia. So Two Hands and Power Rangers are connected.
Nice. I'm glad we have that in common.
Were you ready ready as a director for the success of Two Hands? I mean, you were a lot younger, and it blew up in Australia, especially. Were you ready, do you think, or would you do things differently?
I don't know. It's a weird question to answer, because I sort of wasn't here, which I know sounds weird, but you know, as I mentioned earlier, the film had its premiere at the Sundance Film Festival.
Yeah.
And Heath was sort of like kind of living in LA at the time. You know, he was living with his girlfriend at the time. And so at the end of Sundance, I kind of just stayed in LA with him. And, you know, he was sort of broke and I was broke, and we'd just sort of spend our days playing tennis. And then eventually we both got other jobs. You know, I got another film which was shooting in Germany. And so, you know, I went back to Australia for a few weeks for the premiere, but I really didn't go back to Australia. I was then sort of away for quite a long time.
Okay.
And I guess it was only when I sort of got back, you know, that I had people going, "Oh yeah, I love that movie. Oh yeah," you know. So I guess I kind of missed,
right.
You know, I missed the success, if you like.
If you missed the standing ovation at the Sydney Film Festival, were you there for that screening?
Oh no, was that the one at the State Theatre?
Yeah, the one at the State Theatre. Yeah.
Yeah, I was there for that. That was fantastic.
It was.
In fact, actually, one of the best comments I got at the end of that screening, I'll never forget, was this young bloke came up to me and said, "Oh, I love the movie, mate." He goes, "My dad was a criminal and I actually grew up in that world, and you really nailed it. So well done."
That's a compliment. That's great.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Did you take a lot of meetings after the movie came out, and with like producers and offering you projects all of a sudden?
Yeah, well, yes, I did. And weirdly, the one thing that I did, I signed a deal back then, which was this, this quite prestigious thing at the time, which was a 3-picture deal with Miramax.
Yeah.
So I actually met Harvey Weinstein and had him sort of complimenting me and saying, we're going to make movies with you, but I, I never did end up working with him, and that was probably for the best.
Certainly was. Yeah, I've interviewed plenty of people that have had dealings with him, but you might have lucked out.
Mm.
Was there ever any thought of a sequel or even a prequel of Pando, how he got to where he was, or any kind of follow-on and extension of Two Hands?
No and yes. Look, I had never thought about it, mostly because the movie was such a sort of it was such a big moment in my life, and and I guess it it kind of spawned this major friendship that I had with Heath. And then when he passed away, it was just such a massive moment in my life. That movie, I guess, sort of just held this very strange place in terms of my life and my life experience, and so the idea of trying to do a sequel without him just seemed ridiculous. But then roughly a year and a half ago, I got approached. Well, the original producer, Marion McGowan, got approached to do a TV version of Two Hands. And I was really resistant against it at first, but then sort of convinced to at least put a room together full of writers and to see what was possible. And it actually was sort of this very interesting, cathartic kind of experience, having this room full of writers basically psychoanalyze this 20-year-old film, and to see what was possible in terms of turning it into a television series. And some really great ideas came out. And so we're actually we've actually developed a TV version of Two Hands, and just trying to get it financed and up and running at the moment. So
well, it was done with Romper Stomper. They made a series.
Yeah, well, it's actually done with a lot of things, everything from What We Do in the Shadows to MASH. So there's a long history of movies kind of getting turned into television shows and having having another life, if you like, and becoming something interesting. And so I guess I got a sense that look, I was cynical about it and precious, I guess, about it for personal reasons. But then when I actually thought about it, wait on a second, why are you, what's your purpose as a filmmaker? It's surely to make something that people like and want more of. Yeah. And to sort of, so then there's an opportunity, you've created something that lives in people's minds, so you may as well do something with it. So that was, I guess, the motivation. Yeah.
Well, it's been part of my life for a good part of 4 years since I first saw it at the State Theatre, and it gets brought up regularly between my brother and I. We watch it on regular occasions, so I love it. Did you keep any props or costumes or anything? Maybe the Scrabble board?
I did. I've got the original clapper board. Yeah, I've got that in a storage box somewhere. And the the original crew T-shirt has.
Oh, nice.
I've got that lying around somewhere. It's got "Shotty's a good mate" written on it. But that's about it. I did actually at the end of the production buy the car. Echo's Ford. But because I was away for so long, I had it sort of just sitting in storage, and and it was just, it ended up just sitting there for years in storage. And then so finally I got married and my wife made me sell it, which was a good idea. It was just costing a lot of money to store it. I ended up selling it to Merrick. Merrick Watts, and
Right.
he then owned it for a while, and then he sort of on-sold it as well. So
Oh.
where it is now, I don't know.
Is there a director's cameo? Do you appear in the movie at any point?
No.
No?
No, I think the movie's better without me in it.
Now, another big point of the movie to me is the soundtrack. Was it the first time that you collaborated with Powderfinger? I know you've had an association with them. How did it come about?
Well, it was sort of interesting because we were cutting the movie together, and we got to the end sequence, and we're trying to sort of perfect it and get it right. And we ended up putting a song on it, you know, that had singing and lyrics and everything. And we sort of thought,
yep,
it worked really well. And we had this track by Morcheeba on there as a temp track, and the feeling of it and the way the song built and the way, you know, just the sort of the vibe that it gave was really great. And the fact that no one was talking meant that the lyrics sort of were really good. The problem is the Morcheeba song, the lyrics were completely wrong for what they were saying.
Yeah.
So eventually we went, oh shit, wouldn't it be great if we could find a band or something to write a song that would be sort of like the same structure and build in the same kind of way and have the same kind of vibe, but had lyrics that are a bit more, you know, speaking to what was, you know, going on in the movie. And I'd sort of, you know, I was a fan of Powderfinger. I'd sort of, you know, like their music, and I just asked the, you know, producer, oh, what about them? And they, I ended up flying up to Brisbane with a copy of the movie and showed it to them, and they went, okay. And they actually had a few weeks off before they were about to start a tour. And so they went, oh, it's actually good timing for us. You know, we'll have a crack at trying to write something. And they sent a demo with a couple of songs, and one of them was These Days.
Yeah.
And we put it up in front of the pictures and just went, oh my God, they've absolutely nailed it. And so that's how that, you know, that's how that came about. The, you know, the song was actually written as a piece of score for the movie. And yeah, you know, I guess because they really enjoyed the experience, because they sort of said, oh, you know, we really like writing to a brief, you know, they liked that, you know, like rather than just writing anything, it was sort of like, oh, it was really nice to have that kind of brief. So it was a really happy experience, and you know, and the band and I ended up becoming good friends and collaborating again over the years.
Yeah, I'm sure you walked past me at their Sunsets farewell tour, walking around with a camera on your shoulder.
Yeah.
That if that was you, I'm pretty sure it was. I was at both those concerts in Sydney.
It probably was, because yeah, so was I. I was at a lot of those concerts, because yeah, that was. I got a phone call from them saying, hey, we're splitting up and we're going to do a last tour. Can you try and, you know, document it? And yeah, that was an amazing experience and really emotional experience, I got to say.
Yeah,
too.
I just remember someone who looked like you with a big camera on their shoulder walking through the crowd. So I'm assuming it was you.
Yeah.
1999 is often regarded as one of the greatest years in movies. How do you feel that Two Hands is part of that legacy?
I don't know. I mean, I never really thought about 99 as a year to remember. Why? What else came out on that? In that
well,
year?
There's a whole book on all the films that got released in 1999, and there are so many classics. And I'll go a couple like The Matrix, Fight Club. There are a lot of movies that came out in 99, and Two Hands is part of that legacy. So if you haven't thought about it, now you should, because you're part of a very big string of movies that got released that year that were brilliant.
Well, The Matrix was actually shooting in Sydney at the same time as us. Like our shoots were at exactly the same time. And all I remember is that it was really hard to get special effects people to come and work on my film because they were all booked up on The Matrix.
Do you think you could do a Two Hands, like you sort of are, your new Two Hands that you mentioned? Is it going to be done with modern technology or set during that same period?
No, it's going to be contemporary. And
Okay.
and yes, you know, I guess the dream is to, you know, really use modern technology and we're planning on having sort of like a supernatural element, but rather than it just being shot sort of old school, we're going to use, hopefully use a bit of digital technology to give it a different kind of look. So yeah, I guess we're going to take a lot of the idea is we take a lot of the tropes and the ideas from the movie, but present it in a really modern way.
What's your opinion, briefly, on the Australian film industry at the moment? How it stands right now. Have you got an opinion?
Well, I guess I do. I mean, it's a very long, complex question, and there's a lot of issues involved, including the rise of streaming and COVID, and and the fact that home cinema technology has evolved to this incredible place. That cinema, not just in Australia but all around the world, is facing a real existential crisis, and the pressure now to, I guess, not make films, or to make films that are going to be made directly for a streaming platform, is pretty intense. So I guess how Australia fits into that overall international picture is evolving as well, and look at, we're very fortunate here in that we do have, a vibrant local industry that reflects our cultural values and
thriving again.
Yeah, and well, look, I think we always have had, a local industry that's been a form of cultural expression for us as Aussies. And how well those films and TV shows travel is always going to be a complex issue. But I think the future's potentially quite bright.
I agree. The cast, and I know you've probably spoken about him quite a lot. Firstly, before I ask how you cast Heath in the lead role, how you found him, he does an upside down handstand in a scene in the movie. Was that him doing it on his own, or did he suggest that? Was it in the script?
Yeah, no, that was definitely, it was in the script, and that was him. I think he'd done a bit of practicing to make sure that he could do upside down handstand, upside down push-ups.
Yes, he looked like it was him, and I just looked unrehearsed. That's all. I thought he might have just done it for the scene.
Yeah, well, he was very young and fit at the time, so he could handle it.
How did you meet him, and how did you cast him? I'm sorry if you've told this story plenty of times before. And I actually got to meet him once informally. We were standing at a party after the old AFI Awards back in the day when they were on, and we were talking about surfing. We're having a drink together. Lasted all of maybe 5 minutes, but it's a moment I'll never forget. So how did you meet him?
Well, I guess I knew that I needed a certain type of actor to play this role, and it was going to be very difficult to find someone who was, going to be able to tick all the boxes. And I guess sort of, living in Sydney and hearing from a lot of the people who I knew, everyone was talking about this guy Heath, I'd be just sort of describing to people what I'd be looking for, and they go, "You got to check out Heath Ledger. You just got to check this guy out," because they either knew him in person or they'd worked with him on the few things that he'd done at the time. But at the time, he was shooting this TV show up on the Gold Coast called Raw. Yeah. And by the time I was able to track him down, he'd actually gone back to LA, and so we organised an audition. And I got a sort of like a local casting agent to read opposite him, which was very weird, having this American voice on the tape going, "Just take the fucking cash down to Bondi and see a chick there called Sharon." And but let's put it this way, as soon as I saw the tape, I just went, holy shit, that's him without a doubt. Like,
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a lightning bolt kind of moment. So I then jumped on a plane and went over to LA, and we met in Hamburger Hamlet, and sat and chatted for a couple of hours, and then the conversation turned towards snowboarding, and he said, "Hey, should we go snowboarding tomorrow?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." So he came and picked me up the next morning, and we drove to Big Bear and spent the day snowboarding together. And I got to say, there's going snowboarding with someone, because you're flying down hills together and laughing and crashing and having fun. But then sitting on chairlifts, you get a lot of time to chat.
That's true. Yeah.
So we really got a good time to talk about the movie, but also to get to know each other a little bit. And yeah, so that was how we first met. But then we obviously
stayed mates,
spent a lot of time together afterwards.
I think it was lightning in a bottle. Also casting one of our national treasures, Rose Byrne. Their connection on screen was perfect chemistry, and I love in that photo scene that look she gives. I mean, was that a one take? Because it's an amazing little moment.
Yeah. I think it might have been a one take. I can't quite remember now, but
Rose is that talented. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess I just sort of count myself very lucky, because yeah, you're right. It's not often that kind of talent comes along, and to get to actors of that caliber right at the beginnings of their career, is really lucky. And I think about the movie. I just sort of had a look at a few scenes again the other day, and I realized that without those actors in it, the movie wouldn't have been as good.
No, probably not.
You know what I mean? Like it's actually their talent. I mean, look, a lot of things came together and worked in that film, but you can't make a great film without great actors. That's what I've come to realize. And so, I got really lucky, finding those people.
Yeah,
the way I did.
I mean, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I won't have to talk about how great Bryan Brown was in it. David Field. I mean, Susie Porter. You really did everyone from a major role down to a small, 1-2 line roles. You had it down pat. So well done on the casting.
Yeah, thanks. Well, actually, funnily, that was the observation that I got a lot while we were shooting the film. And look, casting doesn't always go well. It is a bit of a Zen-like process, because you can't necessarily control it. Like it's like the actors come and find you, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And yeah, each new actor who would arrive on set, you just see all the smiles of the faces of the crew. And a lot of the crew would come up to me going, "Oh man, the casting's so good." And yeah, I guess there was that vibe of, oh yeah, we had sort of gotten it right, and the casting director Christine King had done this fantastic job finding all these people who were able to sort of take their roles, to a whole new place.
Even those two kids,
right.
Major moments in the film, and I didn't know who they were.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's on Blu-ray. A special edition by Umbrella Entertainment, and I collect physical media. You don't want to know how many movies I've got in my collection. I've still got like VHS as well, by the way.
Nice.
Why did you participate in bringing it out? Like, why are you a fan of physical media? Is this why we've waited so long for a special edition to finally arrive?
Look, I didn't have direct involvement in these sort of distribution decisions. And yes, look, I am happy for this film to be seen. I've realized that, that all the different media involved in showing, film and television is valid. And my son actually watches a lot of things on his 13-inch laptop or even his phone. And So yes, the idea that there's going to be a high quality physical copy like a Blu-ray, is really cool. So yeah.
Quickly before we go, can I mention The Informers? Now, what was it like working with? I mean, I've got a copy of that. Speaking of physical media on DVD, great cast. How did you come about directing that film, and what was it like in particular to work with Mickey Rourke?
That was such a crazy experience, that whole movie, and some of the stories attached to that are just nuts.
Maybe another whole other chat sometime.
Yeah, I mean, if you sort of asked people in the industry, who are some of the craziest actors of all time, it would be a lot of the cast who are in that movie, and definitely Mickey Rourke is on that list. But look, I personally got along great with him, and I loved him, and I just think he's such a sort of a massive, scary looking dude. Like he's much bigger than what you think he is. He's about 6'3", and he's solid, and he's kind of fierce looking, but he's the most sensitive soul you ever meet. And I think his sensitivity has worked against him at times and caused him problems in the past. But in my case, he was just awesome. And in fact, when he finished shooting, he actually wrote me a little handwritten note saying how much he enjoyed working with me, which was one of the nicest things an actor has done. Just writing just a little note saying, "Hey, thank you so much for the experience."
That's so good.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of time for Mickey Rourke.
Well, he puts in a knockout performance, and he's acting opposite the late Brad Renfro. So that was quite sad too, his passing, because that would have been one of his final performances.
It was his final performance. It was the last one. Yeah.
Yeah. But I really like Mickey Rourke, and you brought him together, even though they didn't share the screen, with Kim Basinger. 9.5 weeks.
Yes. Yes. Well, they did sort of see each other at the premiere and gave each other a little hug. And
good.
And I think, look, she's sort of a very complex individual as well. And again, I got along great with her. But, I asked her about Mickey at one point and said, "Oh, how was that whole process?" And she just sort of laughed and said, "Oh, he's the best, but he's just so complicated." And he sort of said the same thing about her. Look, I think actors generally are complicated people, who are very, sensitive, passionate, a lot of them very dark, and, have their demons.
Well, you certainly brought together a selection of fantastic actors. Billy Bob Thornton, Winona Ryder also was in there. Austin Nichols was good in it. 2008 movie that I like the soundtrack of as well. Must have cost a lot of money to get some of those songs. Pat Benatar at a funeral. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll leave it at that. I will talk about Ned Kelly and other things another day, maybe. What's next? Is it definitely the next project for you is the Two Hands contemporary movie or series, or will it be something else? Have you got in the pipeline you can share?
I've got a few things going on. One's a police drama, which is a contemporary true story about, police using covert encrypted apps to.
This sounds good.
Lay framework for this massive worldwide sting operation that literally arrests hundreds and hundreds of criminals all in one day, and seizes guns and ammunition and drugs and cash. And it's an amazing true story that I'm working on, right at the moment. But in terms of like what actually goes into production next, I don't quite know. I guess I'll just wait and see. I'm sort of developing these projects and seeing which one I'll end up shooting first.
And I will share with you that Paramount actually used one of my quotes for Ned Kelly in the marketing. So there was a few quotes used, but that was the first quote I ever had. used in a marketing campaign for a movie. So that's why Ned Kelly is also quite close to my heart.
Right. What was the quote?
I can't remember, I've got to be honest, but it was from Film Inc. magazine. It was when I was doing some
Oh,
work for Film Inc. So yeah.
oh, nice journalism.
Well, thank you very much for your time, mate. I'll